Thanks, Patrick. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 3rd regular meeting of Walpole Select Board. Let's all stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So our first appointment of the evening is with Betsy Dyer to talk about geocaches. So Betsy, welcome, and I know you're going to enlighten us on geocaches, how they work,
Yes.
and what we're trying to accomplish with your request.
Yes, I'm Betsy Dyer, Conservation Commission. Landis Hershey knows I'm here. She delegated this to me, and I volunteered to have it delegated to me because I actually think it's an interesting little problem that we have that could be easily solved. Geocaching has been popular for 20 years, ever since global positioners that have a certain accuracy have been available to ordinary people. So it's been about 20 years. And the hobby is essentially consists of one geocacher will hide a little geocache, and I'll pass around some examples. We have some kind of cute examples here, and then provide the coordinates for it online, and then other geocachers will find will use those coordinates to find the little object. There'll be a little notebook inside. You'll sign your name to it, but then you go online and report that you found it. So it's an online game as well. So I'll pass, this is my little exhibit. So it can be a little tiny geocache like this. This could be hanging in a tree. Or it could be a fake rock like this. I love those. Little notebook, little pencil. Some of the notebooks are even tinier than this because if they fit into the rock, they have to be tinier. Little tiny plastic container. Could be a slightly larger plastic container because sometimes kids would like to put some trinkets for each other to find inside. So these are some small examples that I'm passing around. So currently we have about 10 geocaches in Walpole that are active. There have been about 20 over the years. Some of them get decommissioned because people have to keep them up. I mean, if they're in a hollow tree, they have to make sure the tree is not filling with water or something. So everything's, and I'll also say that there's currently a 351 town challenge in Massachusetts that is bringing people from all over the state and actually all over the country to Walpole to check Walpole off their list. So the idea is to geocache in every single town in the state. Actually, lots of states have these. We get international geocachers here. My husband, who's a geocacher, was just saying we get a lot of people from Germany coming to Walpole to find a geocache in the town forest and then doing what I don't know, going home, I guess. So it's actually, geocachers are kind of passionate about this. Okay, so why am I here? Recently, and I think this makes sense, recently the geocaching organization is asking for a little bit of help vetting some of these caches. It's a volunteer organization, so if we want to set a geocache, we have to run it by them. For starters, you're not allowed to do it in a national park, can't do it on private property, so there are all these little rules, they vet them, then they give permission to go ahead and set the geocache. But they don't know everything about Walpole, they're just people who are volunteering in Massachusetts. They'd like to have a liaison in town to just say, yes, you can put this in Adams Farm, or you can put a geocache in the town forest, or one of our other obvious properties like that. I think it makes sense for Conservation Commission to do it, and Landis is okay with this. We don't think we're going to be overrun with geocachers bothering us about this. We think it's pretty straightforward, but one really good example of something that we should vet is you shouldn't put a geocache in the middle of a wetland, or you shouldn't put a geocache in a place that's historically delicate in some way. So there are a number of different things that would be reasons to have someone in town say, yes, go ahead, put this geocache in. So we need a liaison, and so I'm suggesting that it be Conservation Commission in a similar way to the way we would be if there were a Boy Scout project to an Eagle Scout project that involved something on conservation lands. The Boy Scout would come to us. So I think it's similar to that. So we need your permission to allow us to be the liaison for that.
So it's a fascinating process you've described, and I think it makes sense to have the Concom be the authority over this. And reason I say this, as I've read through some of the criteria for judging whether a geocache should be in a certain area or not, so much of it falls right directly into what the Concom does. So I think it's a great idea, and be supportive of it. Other comments or questions from the board?
I agree with what you said. I think it's kind of an interesting thing, so.
Yeah, I know my nephews are in 30s that we used to do that with them when they were little, and it was kind of fun. But I did just want to add that as far as I know I'd reached out to Jim about the Forest Committee, just because of their plans of deforesting and things like that, that I think that when they're doing their cleaning up of the town forest and stuff like that, that I think that you guys should definitely be working with them too.
Yeah. So I agree. Town Forest has some very particular things, like what they had to do recently with the, so we didn't want to have 3 or 4 different places in town that would be the central liaison, but you're right. If there's some question we have for the Adams Farm people, or some question that we have for the Town Forest, or the Trails Committee, those were the
Right.
obvious groups. So I think we're thinking we're just the starting place, but we'll do it as diligently as we do Boy Scout projects. I mean, we're pretty serious about, how the conservation lands are handled.
Yeah, oh no, I know, and I think you guys are probably the lead people that it should be, but I think in, maybe your own policies,
Yeah.
as you develop them, like as you said, I don't think people are gonna be coming in droves, that you're gonna be overwhelmed from the beginning. But I think Adams Farm Committee and Town Forest Committee, Trails Committee, I think they should all definitely be part of your consulting process.
Okay, yes, good.
Okay, any other comments or questions for Betsy? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the request to hide geocache on town property such as Walpole Woods, Adams Farm, and other places that people take walks. And should we also reference the Conservation Committee as
Yes.
being the
Liaison,
liaison?
yeah.
I'll second that.
Further discussion, being none, all in favor, say aye.
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 500. Betsy, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great idea. Okay, let's move on to new business. It's a little early for open forum, so we've got the request from Blessed Sacrament for one-day wine and malt license. 2 of them, I think, March
Yes.
21st
I'll
and May
make a
2nd.
motion to request the Blessed Sacrament Parish for a one-day wine malt license for March 21st, 2020, and May 2nd, 2020.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500.
I'll make a motion to approve the request for Blessed Sacrament Parish to have a one-day wine and malt for that's the same one.
That's a different date.
For March 21st and May 2nd.
Yeah, okay.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500.
Wait, what is, okay.
Okay, next we've got Town Forest Committee. We're gonna promote Christine Wellman to regular from associate and have Stephen Sear go from regular to associate. So I don't see either here. I guess we'll just entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to promote Christine Whalen from associate member to regular member on the Town Forest Committee.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 500.
I'll make a motion to change the status from Stephen Sear to from a regular to an associate member on the Town Forest Committee.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Okay, I got 10 past 7 right now. I don't note anybody here to speak at open forum, so we'll move on to our next set of business, which is to talk about several of the warrant articles in the upcoming Springtown meeting. I'd like to, if I could, take Articles 21 and 22 out of order, Jim, because we've got Ashley here and don't want to have you wait here all night. So So why don't we go ahead and start with 21 and 22?
Sure, so if you want to give me a brief introduction, then you can take over. So obviously, these two articles relate to the inclusionary housing zoning bylaw and housing trust bylaw. As you all know, that the boards are sponsoring both of these bylaw proposals. And hand it off to Ben and Ashley.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so these are the two articles that that this board had a workshop on a couple of weeks ago, which was actually very well attended by residents. We had a great give and take, a lot of questions and concerns voiced by residents, and members of the board were able to discuss some of the finer points. So I won't get into any of that now. Ashley Clark is here tonight with us to answer any questions that folks may have. So I would just open it to you, Jim.
Sure. So Ashley, you want to step up to the podium? So let's take Article 21 first, which is the inclusionary zoning bylaw. And does anybody on the board have questions for Ashley?
I just
Yeah,
have
Nancy.
one. What are any of the concerns coming from the planning board?
So we went to the planning board, I'm forgetting the dates, twice. The first time we went, they gave us some homework to do. We returned to them, we did the homework. The concerns that, there have been so many things that we've processed, so I'm trying to remember who was what. The planning board was concerned about, the biggest one that's coming to my mind is going too far, having too much affordable housing, that we really only, there was a concern that if we only need 10%, this bylaw, requests 15% from some developments. So why is that number being there? I think at the session before the workshop, I showed some math and showed how many projects you would need to do at 15% to even move move it up by half a decimal. So, I don't think that us ever getting to 15% on our SHI is realistic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and then there was a couple others. Yeah, I'm thinking along with you.
Language things that
Yep.
were.
Yep. So I know that Sarah Katib, Katie Beatty, and Phil Zachariowski, all three of them had given us some in writing, some verbally, and we also need to remember that this is going back all the way to fall town meeting as well, because it's substantially similar document, and so they've been working up with the housing partnership the entire time. So it's been an iterative process.
Like we added an S after formulas because there's two, just little feedback and stuff like that.
So do you feel that all their concerns have been addressed?
The typo, making the language clearer has been addressed. I'm not going to speak to how a board member might feel about the 10 to 15% range.
Okay,
I've not asked, I've not had that follow-up,
right.
so I don't want to represent that.
Yeah,
they're
for sure.
comfortable.
And they're gonna have, the planning board's gonna have another whack at it, right, when they have their public hearing. So, I wouldn't anticipate anything from the folks that I mentioned who have been engaged in it. I wouldn't anticipate them having any other issues. But, we maintain an open dialogue with the planning board, the select board, and then the housing partnership as well, so.
It was a significant topic of conversation, the 10 to 15% at the workshop, as you know, Ashley. And what I took away from it, and you've already said this, but I'm going to say it a little bit differently, is that because of the way projects come on, and you don't want to be right at the 10% because you could dip under it. If a certain type of project came on that didn't have affordable housing, you could actually dip under the 10%, which could open us up then again for a 40B. And I think that was sort of the punchline as we spent quite a while talking about this at the workshop of, what was it, a week or two ago. And at the same time, there was discussion of, well, we're not sure we want to see it go above the 15%. And I think the point you made tonight and the one you made in the workshop was it would be very difficult, just given the way projects come on, to actually get over 15%. So that's not.
I think 10%. You're referring
Yeah,
to the
over
10%.
10.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
we talk about 15% because we're trying to create a little buffer so that you don't dip back under 10%.
Right.
Right, and just to add, those numbers aren't capturing projects that are being added to the denominator by
Right.
way of 5-unit developments, 4,
That's my
3, 2,
point.
1.
Yeah,
Right.
that's my point, is
Yeah.
that the way projects come on, if they have no affordable component to them, the numerator-denominator relationship changes, and you literally could go the other way,
Right.
which opens up, and therefore you don't want to be right on the 10%, because that's risky. You want to be somewhere north of the 10%, not a lot north, but somewhere north of it, and thus the impetus to go above the 10% to create that buffer.
Yeah.
Right.
I was also, I know I had mentioned about, and I went back and looked, we have had a lot of stub roads, dead-end roads that have been put in that are well under, and technically you could put in a 7-house road, and before you start, you A&R off the 2 corner lots, and then you stay 5 and under. So realistically, people could be putting in 7-house roads and make it so that they fall under that. And so that there shows that then you'd be actually adding 7, not really, not even 5, and getting away with it. They could do
I think,
something.
yeah, and I think
Except there's
it's a
a
great point. It's a,
Isn't there a catch-all in there to try
Well,
and capture that, though?
a
There's
little
a
bit.
10-year limit, so if you subdivide, I think it's 10. I also would say I don't know that that's what a developer would want to do, given the flexibility that this bylaw allows to develop. So they have more room with open space and setbacks and so on, so.
Yeah,
that's
but
a
I,
good point,
I
but
think that that is really also though how they're going to keep bringing that 10% down.
Right.
Which is why we are looking at that 15, because there is a lot of loopholes for the land that we have available to do smaller subdivisions and not trigger.
And Walpole's just, I went through, I got the assessor's data from 2000 to 2010. I'm still doing the analysis, but there are a lot of just 4-unit subdivisions and 3-unit subdivisions
Right.
and 2, just at,
Off Summer
naturally.
Street alone, there's 3 new ones.
So every 10 years, you can't be certain of most things, right? But we can be sure every 10 years we're gonna get that census,
Right, right.
so.
Right, yeah, and we had a number of, between the fall and now, and we've had a number of public hearings, and at the COA, the Housing Partnership hosted a number of public hearings, these meetings, the Housing Partnership meetings, the Planning Board meetings, and we have had a lot of feedback from residents, mainly around, one, we don't want this to be changing the zoning to make it easier for developers to have these types of projects in 40Bs, and is obviously the easy answer is it's not. It's the opposite. We're preventing that.
Right.
And the other concern, which is now escaping me, but it's been a lot. It's been a lot, a long process.
So one of the things we talked about in the workshop was putting together, a fact sheet, frequently asked questions or something like that, to separate the fact from fiction and make sure that the people that are, in town meeting understand, what this is, what it isn't, and so forth, in straightforward and simple terms. So I assume that we're still planning on doing that.
That's in the works.
Beautiful,
Yep, it's
okay.
harder than you would think to distill things
I
down
know,
into
I know, it's a
one page.
complicated
You're like,
thing.
well, how much time do you have?
But it's important because it is complicated, and what you need to do is you need to figure out how to boil it down into, simpler concepts
Yeah.
in a FAQ type thing, Q&A kind of thing, so that we can speak to it with, certainty, fact from fiction, but also clarity, make it easy to consume.
And I would only point out that this has been developed. It's not a Q&A sheet. It's just more of what's the general purpose of it. Here are the special provisions. That was handed out to Finance Committee. I think it was well received. And
Okay.
we're going to continue to work on the
We have a
frequently asked
couple
questions.
one-pagers right now.
So perhaps that's the right answer, I don't know, but something that is not what we get, in the warrant article itself.
And there's,
Okay.
I'm sorry, Ashley, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I did send postcards out to all the RTMs, and
saw
I've
that.
gotten some emails out of that. I've had a couple folks stop by my office, which has been wonderful. People who have the time to sit down and have me walk through all the pieces, so that's been great.
Yep, it's been a lot of face-to-face
Yeah.
dialogue.
some comments. I'll just start with I like the idea of the frequently asked questions sheet. I also, one of the things I would encourage Walpole Cable to do is to try and edit out these hearings that relate to this into online and just say, okay, these are all the hearings that already took place as to Article 5 or Article 6 or Article 21. And so that town meeting members can just go click on these hearings and listen to what Finance Committee had to say, what zoning board, planning board had to say, and what, I reviewed our meeting from the other day. And it's just a good way to get that all in one place and get people to have a full bit of information so they're not asking questions. Not that they can't ask whatever they want at town meeting, but at least some of those questions will already be answered because they were asked elsewhere.
Yeah, I can
So that might-
certainly add to, create a web page and link to all the videos. I don't know if Walpole
Yes.
Media can edit them for me, but we can certainly at least get the right
Ask them.
links.
Yeah, it might be,
consolidated.
it's, sometimes I find it'd be great to do that for the whole set of articles at some point, get, so that, some of the town meeting members that are looking at the last minute to get caught up on what's going on can go around and watch these different videos of what happened at other meetings. So one of the comments during selectmen meeting was that had this been in place before the development downtown, that we'd be in a lot better shape than we are now. And I certainly think that the concept of this is appropriate. I don't, it's only, and it's appropriate because 40B exists, because we need to get ahead of that. I'm not sure if I like the idea in a vacuum without the existence of 40B. But one of the things that I wondered about, and actually Mr. Flowers had said, well, we're not really looking for, the 1 unit from the 10-unit project. We're looking at these big projects and coming up with a good 15% of the units or 12.5% of the units. Saying that, how did, and I noted that Boston is at 12 units or more, and Medfield's at 6. How did the discussion go regarding what would be the number of units that would trigger this? And how did you come up with 6? Or how did they come up with 6, if you know?
Yeah, so, and Ashley, you can jump in as well, please. We had engaged consultant Courtney Starling,
Okay.
right, who had assisted with a lot of the data crunching, data gathering in terms of what are the costs associated with developing in Walpole, what are the other variables, because there's so many variables that go into development besides just the units. It's what kind of units they're going to be, it's how much the land costs, it's the type of town, it's the standard of living in that town or cost of living in that town. And so what she was able to do was to go through all of those variables, look at other towns around us, as you mentioned, Medfield's at 6, and see where does it make sense for Walpole specifically based on those numbers. And we had talked about 4, 5, 6, 10, and 6 was based on that data, the sweet spot, and that would not be overly, prohibitive or burdensome to developers, but would allow Walpole to have an article or a bylaw that was effective.
So there's some data other than other towns.
So it's all the variables that I described. Do you know more about the?
I could just say I have the model that I could share with you that goes into, it's like an Excel spreadsheet that's like this big. It goes into rents that you could get and the different, so for Walpole, and I think Ben said this, but I just want to highlight the 80% AMI and the market rate for rent is actually pretty close to one another. So asking a 6 or 10 unit developer to have a rental unit at 80% AMI is not that far off. So in terms of the burden that it's putting on the applicant, I think it's balanced. I'd also add that some of the other waivers in there make projects that maybe wouldn't be able to be built viable. So I think that the bylaw tries to balance this private developer and needing to make a profit, and also this affordable housing need.
Right, well, certainly, I mean, this does make a project of 6 or more units less attractive without some concessions. I just don't know that, you know, the 6-unit, single-family subdivision is what we're really, like, focused on, as far as the expectation is that a lot of those single-family subdivisions will end up just going to pay into the fund. Is that an accurate picture?
No, so the way that the language is worded, it strongly discourages in lieu fees, because part of the goal, my understanding, part of the goal is to have your affordable units mixed throughout town and not having everything concentrated in one area. That's a lesson that we learned from like the 80s, like don't want concentrated. So I think that the language is written to discourage that. Now, the ZBA has the discretion, and there'd be partnership with the housing partnership to say, yeah, this is appropriate, we would accept an in lieu fee. Examples that have been cited in working with that, and Ben can probably speak to this better than I can, with the housing authority, hey, we need to make our units accessible. A cash payment would be really helpful for us to get our units up to date.
Yeah, and the idea is to have, you know, people say, well, there's a lot in here, there's so many choices, and how are you gonna keep track of it all? And that's exactly the idea, is to have those choices, so that a developer, in our minds, and after having gone through this for over a year, be very hard pressed to find a specific scenario in which they would not be able to make this bylaw work. And that's what we want. I mean, we're not trying to stop development. We just want to make sure that it's within the character of our neighborhoods and that they include affordable units.
But my concern is that a developer is looking at a lot that, you know, or an area that can support, you know, 6 to 10 houses, or, you know, or less than 6 houses, would instead choose to build less houses, more expensive houses on bigger lots than kick into the 6th unit. And so in some cases, that may have the opposite effect than we're looking for.
Sure, and certainly if someone was in between the 5 or 6 and they're going, oh, I don't know, but I just say that the 75% lot reduction that's provided to the affordable unit, and again, that gets averaged out, but my understanding is that land is becoming part of the most expensive part of developing a project, that if it was flat and easy to develop on, it'd be built on. So the land that the town's basically giving to the developer, I think, does a lot to balance that equation.
And that goes back to why we put in that 15%, because there is gonna be a game somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I don't mind the 15, I think the 12.5 and 15 certainly makes sense. It's just to me, the smaller, you know, under 15 development, doesn't make in my mind, doesn't make as much sense to me.
Yeah, and you know, and it's a fair point, David, and if we did find that when this is put in place, and knock on wood, hopefully it is, because we need it so badly, and we found that all we're getting is developers who want to build 6 or 7 units and they're getting hammered, then we can change it. That's very, very unlikely to happen. But towns have done that. Towns have gone to, say, 4, and they're like, well, that's just totally unreasonable, and a couple of years later they change it to 8, or whatever the case may be. And that's certainly, and that's the other thing that I've said a lot to the planning board and some of the folks we've had discussions with is, hey, if there's an aspect of this bylaw that doesn't seem to be applied in the manner that it was intended and it's causing us issues, we can change it. And it's not going away. It's something that we're gonna keep an eye on. And it needs to work for the town. So to the extent that it doesn't, we can change it.
And it's also okay to a developer to build a street with just a couple of really expensive homes because they want to have some humongous lots. You know, it doesn't mean everybody's property has to be affordable. The point is that there's a mix of everything.
Right. Throughout the town as well,
Throughout
right?
the
Isn't that a
town,
big-
right,
Yeah,
and if
that's what
that's-
we're trying to do.
That's what happens.
So, we know Medfield's at 6, Boston's at 12. What are some of the other numbers?
I don't
You don't have them
I don't have
memorized?
them memorized, but I will say that it's true that markets change and we need to be able to be flexible. That we might get a recession and this just totally breaks and we have to come back and rework it. But the way that in the long 5 months that I've been here, at least like anecdotally and looking at some of the buildings that are under construction, the market pressure on Walpole is growing and increasing. So rents are going up, home sale prices are going up. So I think that as we keep going in this direction, the 6 to 12 units are gonna be able to be sustained. But again, if we have a recession, we'll have to come back and rework it because it will break the projects.
Now, just an amendment of this would also require a 2/3. Putting this in place and amending it both require 2/3 vote of town meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Anything else, David?
No, I'm good.
Okay, anything else from anybody?
Yeah, I would just say, and remind the people at home, we're under 10%, so we're susceptible to the 40B. And even with the South Walpole project, which is proposed at 300 units, with the 2020 census that will be happening soon, we'll still be under 10%. So we're sort of still under the gun to do something. I think this is a good, this is a big step in the right direction. And as you said, if we find out in a couple of years this isn't working quite right on the low end, we can always adapt it. I think that a developer who's on the edge of, am I going to build 5 units or 7 units may think the other way, may go to 10, like find a little bit more land and build the bigger one, knowing one of them is going to go to affordable. So we'll have to wait and see what the market determines. So, but, I'm in favor of this, and I do want us to get to 10%, so the pressure's off us long-term for the 40B 300 unit surprise, so.
Right.
And even some of the smaller ones. I mean, there's some other smaller 40Bs in development that
Last
are
week.
being jammed into small neighborhoods. And you start thinking about some of the lots that are in town, and you go, what could a 40B be here? And, a 5-acre lot, you could put a lot of housing on that lot if somebody wanted to. And it'd be nice to give us a little bit more local control, so,
I did a 40B that was 45 units on half an acre
yeah.
Wow.
in a residential, single-family, two-family
Yep.
neighborhood. Like, it's real.
Scary stories.
Yeah, so I, just without repeating what Mark said, those are the right points, and we really do need to do this. We've been in this situation for long enough. We need to resolve it. So I think this is a way to get at this, and so I'm in support of this. So I'll entertain a motion on Article 21.
Ben, you've done so much work. I figured you would probably
Make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 21.
second.
Any further discussion?
I just want to say, I'm going to vote yes, but I think perhaps a 10-unit threshold would be a better threshold or something in that neighborhood. But I certainly I feel, given the 40B law, we certainly need to do something to get ahead of this.
Thanks, David. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Okay, now the second one is Article 22, which is the creation of the Housing Trust. So,
Yeah.
Ben Ashley, you want to take us through that?
Yeah, so the Housing Trust is a vehicle through which, and again, we talked about this the other night in our workshop. So the Housing Trust Fund is the vehicle through which any funds that were set aside by the town or obtained through payment in lieu or any of those forms would go into this fund and would be controlled by the Housing Trust. And the way it's set up from an operational and administrative standpoint is that if Article 21 is approved and then Article 22 is approved, that the Walpole Housing Partnership as it's currently set up will be dissolved by this board. this board will then set up the housing trust, and members will be assigned to the trust based upon the requirements in the article, as set forth in the article. And they will then have the charge to take that forward. So not only would the housing trust then take forward the charge of the WHP in terms of continuing to look for ways to generate affordable housing and to follow the recommendations of the housing plan that was approved by the state, but would also then be responsible for this fund and the monies that are in there. And one other point, before I'm sure there'll be additional discussion and questions, one other point worth looking at is that there's a cap on the funds that the trust can spend without approval of this board. And I know that really, and Ashley can speak to it as well, probably the biggest issue that people have had with this trust is what are they gonna do with the money? And the answer is nothing over $15,000 without the approval of the select board, which is an elected board. So with that, Jim, yeah, if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, thanks. Ashley, anything to add?
Yeah, that was definitely the biggest concern I heard. There were 3 other concerns that I think have been addressed. One of them was the number of members on the trust. So
Yeah.
that's been upped to 7
Mm-hmm.
after a couple hours of debate. And then the second one I'll add is the skills that the folks on the trust have. So some hard skills have been included. You know, you want folks who know how to review pro forma. You want people who have knowledge in housing development and construction and so on. So those have been hardwired in there. And then the third one, there's one more. So it was the number, the oversight, and what was I feel like there's one more that I'm blanking on, but it's
The
been fixed.
CPA?
The CPA, yeah, that's what it was. So the CPA has been removed from the language of this bylaw. That was a big thing people were really concerned
This
about.
passing the housing, I'm sorry.
No, please.
Passing the housing trust is completely and utterly unattached to anything to do with the Community Preservation Act.
Good.
Not attached in any way.
Okay, thank you. Nancy?
I just wanted to mention that I did have a problem with it before. I like all the changes that you've made. And especially, I like that it is a place that when and if we can receive outside money, it's a place to accept it, as far as like grants that they want to apply for over at, our housing units that are already there. And then I really like the check and balance of the spending limit and the oversight from the Board of Selectmen. I think, especially for a committee that is like an appointed committee, that it should come through here.
If I could just jump
Sure.
one more, Jim, is to talk about the, actually, go ahead, I'm sorry. I don't wanna keep this time.
I'm all set.
No, go ahead. If you want to add something, go ahead.
Just to say that, no, now I've forgotten it, so.
Okay. Any other comments? David? Sure. Yeah.
I like the setup now. I do like the fact that it's separated from the Walpole Housing Partnership. I do not see the need to dissolve the Walpole Housing Partnership, however. I think that should stay in existence. I think it should advocate and work on these issues separate and apart from the trust. I think the trust should have a task to spend the money in a manner that is outlined by statute and law, that people can have confidence in, that it's not being spent in a political way or a way with an agenda. And I think, and that gives way to having the Walpole Housing Partnership still in existence that has people on it who are advocating for affordable housing and have them still be in existence. I don't see the need to dissolve that. And I think they should be continuing to work on other initiatives and zoning issues, which would be outside of the role of the trust. So working on, more inclusive zoning provisions, such as whether it's in-law apartment or open space zoning, all of those things that they should still be working on and not be dissolved. And I I don't think what's actually in here says that the Walpole Housing Trust partnership has to be dissolved. I think it's just saying we're creating a new committee, so I'm happy with that. But the part about, I think we should maintain the Walpole Housing Partnership as a committee and keep those people working on those issues.
Well, and there's still a great deal more to be done. If you
Right.
go back and look at the housing production plan, you know, there were a number of recommendations. This was one of them. These are two of them, I should say. But there are many more. And so your point's right, and the work will go on, so.
I just don't see, the trust shouldn't be doing that, though. In order
Right.
for the
Yeah.
taxpayers to say, okay, this group is just, they have a mandate by law as to what they can do with this money, and they're going to do with this, based on this mandate, and have faith in that happening. I think that's better, and then separate
Yeah,
that
I
out.
think their powers are, you know, well laid out in the
Yeah.
article, so you know, I get your point, and I think, you know, at least from where I sit, I think we're good. Other comments or questions?
Yeah, I would say some of what has already been said, that I was kind of cold to this trust idea originally. I thought the changes were very good. I am in favor of this. I do agree with David, and I do like the idea of the affordable housing group staying together and continuing to work on, in whatever format it evolves, to other issues, other housing issues, because we certainly have a lot of them. Setting up this trust doesn't solve our housing issues. So I don't know if you want to be on another committee, but
Well, I think that's the point, right? And that's what we talked about, and we've actually beat it up pretty good here, so I don't think we need to go through it again. But, I mean, we're having trouble keeping the housing partnership staffed as it is.
Yep.
And now we're creating another committee. And so to the extent that these people can certainly do the same thing as the housing partnership, I would expect that people who are on the housing partnership will want to be on this, so that if you did dissolve the housing partnership, then those people would turn around and apply immediately to be a part of the housing trust.
I've heard the opposite too, that they don't
So
want
it
to be
keeps-
on the trust.
Yeah, well, there's a couple people,
Yeah.
but that's different, but, and, you know, it shouldn't be politicized at all because they can't spend any money, right? It all comes
So-
before us, so.
So one idea is, what is the status with the master plan implementation committee?
The committee hasn't been formed yet because the master plan, the RFP for the master plan itself
out.
is still out on the street. Yeah.
Right, but not for redoing the master plan, but did the master plan implementation committee that we've had, did they dissolve, or are they just kind of just not active?
They're not active at all.
They're
We
just
have to
not-
go back and look and see.
So in a way, I mean, originally, part of the master plan implementation committee was a housing component. And as we are going to redo a master plan, that is part of the master plan anyway, that once that is done, it could go back to being more of an active part of the implementation committee that will come from the new master plan. And that way they can keep up with these sort of articles. That's how it started last time. And then once we needed some bylaw changes and things like that, we then broke off the master plan implementation committee to have done the last housing production plan when I was on it.
So maybe we want to, you know, we're starting to sort of implement workshops in between our regular meetings. Maybe we want to have some time to talk about the Master Plan Implementation Committee, the Affordable Housing Committee, the trust, get all those people together in a room and just sort of discuss it. I understand where you're coming from, that sometimes you run out of people, you know, to staff the committees who are willing to be active and spend a lot of time on it. But maybe it would be good to get those groups together and hash it out and see what we really want to do.
I think it's a good idea. So we'll put that on the calendar for some time, Mark. That's a good idea.
Sure.
Jim, we'll find a spot to put it on, okay? I wanted to just comment that, first of all, I thought a lot's been accomplished by the Walpole Housing Partnership in the, two and a half years that it's been in existence at this point. And if you think back to starting from literally ground zero and getting the committee in place with a charge, the work that was done to get the housing production plan, you know, approved through this board and ultimately by the state and accepted by the state, the work that has been done on the inclusionary zoning bylaw and the trust fund, which goes back a year, I think, yeah. And getting the words right, getting, you know, the process right, getting a whole bunch of people involved, and it's been some really, really good work that the Housing Partnership has done, Ben. And Ashley, you've done a lot of good work here as well. And when we went through the workshop the other day, that really became apparent. You know, we had people who were very well versed in what these two articles were all about and what the benefits were. We had a lot of input from people ranging from citizens to the FinCom to the zoning board. We had a really good crew there that night. I think you guys did a good job taking the input that you heard at that workshop and incorporating it into these articles. And I think they're really, really strong at this point. So I just wanted to congratulate all of you for the work that's gone into this over the last literally 2.5 years. And I feel like we're getting to a really interesting and good place here, so thank you. So with that said, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 22.
Second.
Any further discussion on Article 22? There being none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, 5-0-0. Ashley, thanks.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you being here tonight.
Thank you,
And for all your help.
Thanks.
See you later. Okay. All right, Jim, let's go back to Article 2.
Sure,
I'll make a motion for no action Article 2.
sure.
There's nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing
Second
there.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 5-0-0. Article 3.
Article 3 is the salary schedule and COLA implementation article. Impacts 71 employees. It creates approximately, creates or clarifies about 5 new positions, including Superintendent, Parks, Cemeteries, and Forestry. You may recall that when Bob LeBlanc left, we separated the assistant and the super of Parks, Cemeteries, and Forestry and Highways, made it 2 separate positions in distinct divisions. So we just clarified that. The treasurer collector, which is, because of the charter change from a few years ago, we're able to separate that out. Public health nurse, which was recently created and funded last year, and the assistant council and aging director. So I'll take any questions.
And you also had on the next page, the recreation hourly wage adjustment.
Yeah, which is to bring it up to the minimum wage.
Yep. Okay. All right, any discussion or questions? David?
In creating the new positions, are they positions that exist but are newly named, or?
They exist, they're funded, and they're just basically a clarification, because when Drew Hand was the assistant superintendent there and Bob was there, it was more or less, Drew was handling highway, and it was just more of a clarification and everything, so.
So it's not, you're not talking about a new hiring, it's a.
No, these are people in the existing positions.
Okay,
Yes.
and there's already, as Assistant Council on Aging Director, is that a new position?
No, that was new this fiscal year.
Okay, and Public Health Nurse?
This was last year.
That was last year also, yeah.
Okay.
We've been wanting that for a long time.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay,
I'll make a motion to recommend favorable action Article 3.
I'll second that.
all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0-0. Article 4.
Article 4, recommend no action on that one.
I'll make a motion, recommend no action Article 4.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 5-0-0.
And, Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend maybe going into executive session before we vote on Article 13, just so I can kind of review the contract with everyone, and then we
Okay.
can do it out at the end of the session.
Back out of executive session
Yeah.
and vote Article 13.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable. Okay.
And the only other article on here for tonight is Article 18, which is a Water Department grant from the Water Superintendent and the Sewer and Water Commission. That is actually a DEP grant that's being offered, which is the town would front $70,000 proposed funding sources through retained earnings. The DEP would pick up most of it. The town would have to come up with approximately $14,000 in in-kind services, which is basically police details, our labor for the sewer and water department, and then $14,000 in actual funds. And this is to offset to allow them to install some GPS tracking in some of the locators and the water gates, the hydrants, and cut down on some of the excess capacity there.
I'll make a motion for favorable action Article 18.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Yep.
David?
What do these gates do?
They actually control the way that it was explained to me, they control the water valves throughout some of the hydrants, and I can have Bernie in here if you'd like to, but
No, that's all right. I mean, Sewer and Water is gonna approve this as.
yeah, they're the ones proposing it. Yeah.
I'm fine.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of February 11th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Okay, I don't think so.
There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 500. Jim, Town Administrator's update?
Sure. Did we skip over the budget, or do you want to briefly talk about it at all?
We did, actually, you're right, so we should come back on that, so it was tagged on to the end of the warrant, so.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'd like to just review some of the changes that have been made over the last 1 to 2 weeks with the budget. Finance Committee has yet to see these yet, because it's pretty new. Our health insurance numbers came in very well. We budgeted 8%, and they came in at 2.5%. Initially, they came in at 2.7%, but after some due diligence, Christine Brown in the HR department, she tracked down a miscellaneous claim that was tagged on to the town, and saved us about $20,000-$30,000 there. So what we've done is I've gone through and I've identified some funding, some items that's been cut short in the budget as part of my recommendations, and if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of go over those one
Yeah,
at
I
a
think
time.
that'd be helpful.
So, legal services, initially I requested $220,000 in there to balance the budget. I knocked that down by $5,000, so I'm just recommending we bump that back up to an even $220. Right now, our legal budget, I think Kelly just provided me with an update. We have about $60,000 left between now and the end of the fiscal year. We may need some additional funding in there. It's been a busy year. A lot of these 40Bs have taken up a considerable amount of resources, so I'm being mindful and watching that one. So no action, but that's the reason I'm recommending a change there. Treasurer, tax collector, I increased expenses from $95,000 to $101,000. This is mostly for areas that I cut for the financial services. That's mostly our financial advisor for $4,000. And for postage, I really cut that down, so I added the $2,000 back in there. Town clerk was increase in personnel services. That's the part-time clerk. Again, to balance the budget, I cut about $2,214, which would reduce the person down from 24 to 22 hours. I'm recommending adding that back in. And I cut the expense line by $1,500 in the preservation of the historical books and periodicals. Planning board, something that the Finance Committee expressed an interest in is making sure that they have some additional funds in there to, if they need to hire a consultant or anything. So initially I cut that down to $25,000. I'm recommending we add $75,000 back into there to bring it to an even $10,000. Community development, Ashley, I think, is doing a great job since coming on here. She just reminded you that she's only been here 5 months, but she's done a whole heck of a lot of work. She requested a budget. I cut it by $500 to make, just again, to make the budget balance. I would recommend adding that back in the expense line. Police department, recommend adding $5,000 back in. And this is kind of a last minute thing that came up. I added $5,000 in police and about $12,000 in fire. This is for the Asher and Alice training that's been going a long way. Both the police chief and fire chief asked for those additional funds to be added in there so they could have training for the officers and the firefighters to make sure that they can go into the schools and the municipal buildings. We've expanded that. I think it's important given today's climate and everything. In the fire department, I'm pleased to say that we added the full funding in there for an additional firefighter to bring all 4 groups up to 10. In the expense line, the increase of $9,500 just would basically outfit that extra firefighter there. And I believe that Chief Bailey at the next meeting, or one of the meetings this month, is going to bring forward 2 to 3 candidates to fill those roles.
Good.
The fire academy is not filling for, is currently filling for July 1st or August 1st, so I suggested to get those on now, so we reserve some places in line there.
Seems like they need more fire academies.
They do, they're slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just would add to this that the police and fire are on our workshop schedule for, I think it's next week,
Yeah.
to go through a detailed review of both in terms of the overall strategy going forward and direction over the next several years. So this will play right into that. I think both chiefs were going to mention Asher and Alice in that
Yes.
workshop as well and take us through that. But more importantly is to understand sort of the overall direction over the next several years and where we need to be.
Yes, Rick Matz is also attending that to do the same talk about DPW.
Good, good.
Yeah. Skipping down to Walpole Public Schools, total budget increase recommended is $288,977. Walpole Public Schools initially asked for a budget increase of 4.8%. Right now, their increase with this change brings them up to 3.92%. It's actually, within the last 6 years, it's the second highest amount. Last year was the highest, being 4.06%. So it's getting them closer to where they need to be as far as what their request is. Tri-County, an increase of about $3,000 to bring it up in line with what their request is. Council on Aging increased the personnel services over there for one of the part-time positions. It's currently funded at 18. This will bring it up, I believe, to 24. Kerry is doing a great job over there. It's well used. The building is constantly full, and people are coming in and out of there. And the added staff time is just needed. It's not a person, it's just increasing hours there. Veteran Services, John's doing a great job. He's out soliciting, getting veterans interested in the various programs, so much so we got to increase that budget. I'd remind you that next year we would get the 75% of that $10,000 back when we pay it out in veterans benefits. So, in Trails Committee, again, Gary does a whole lot with a little. And he reminded Mark Gallivan and I a couple of months ago that he puts a lot of his money into that. And the Finance Committee asked me to find a way to put $500 in that budget to do a lot with his handouts and his flyers and everything that he does in the work. So those kind of highlight the changes that I've made to the budget as a result of the insurance. Do you have any initial questions? I know I handed out the budget last week, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I don't. I appreciated this recap, though, and it's in the detail that you've given us. And it, is obviously in line with all the things that we've been talking about over the last several months as you've worked your way through the budget to first reduce them to get to a balanced budget. And now we have the opportunity to correct some of those, which I think is good. Again, police and fire are, and DPW are going to be important aspects of what we're going to be doing here going forward, and so that those workshops are going to come into play big there. I think we do need to do something about the Tri-County. It always surprises me how much we are getting assessed by Tri-County, and I think at some point we need to have our Tri-County reps come in and chat with us in terms of where that budget is and what we could be doing to perhaps curtail some of the allocations that we're getting from Tri-County. On a per pupil basis, it's quite a high number.
Yeah.
And so I think we should tee that up for a future meeting as well, Jim.
Yeah, invite Ted, and we just appointed a new person.
Yeah, Steve Sullivan, yeah.
Okay. we can
Okay,
do that.
good. Other comments on the budget? David?
I did want to say the Council on Aging, I know that we've increased a person there over the last year or year before, but the amount of volunteers that we have, we definitely aren't paying the salary for the amount of work that's being donated over there. And, I think we're very lucky on how many people donate their time and put in hours to help with programs and things like that. So, I think that's kind of remarkable that what we could be paying people over there could be a lot more. We're lucky.
Yes.
Agreed.
good luck.
Other comments or questions?
Sure. I have a couple.
David, yeah, go ahead.
So the public schools, you had, at one point you had said that there was a gap of $800,000 between what they were asking and what you had in the budget. Is that accurate?
I think it's, give or take, it sounds about right.
And does that represent what you said, the 4.8% 8%.
They were asking for the 4.8, which was the gap, and when I presented the budget message, that was the gap at the time.
Okay, and so, since then, this increase of $289,000 represents a closing of that, is that the only closing of that gap
Yeah.
that you've done so far?
At this time, yeah,
And so that brought it up to 3.92%.
yes,
Okay. Where did the money come from?
the health insurance, because we budgeted 8%, and it
All
came in
of
at
this is the
2.5.
result of the health insurance change. Is the school, so, 300. Is the school found any savings to close that 800,000
I know they have
gap?
begun to, they're actually, I don't know if they voted on it yet, but they were proposing some increases to the one that jumps out to me is the school busing. They haven't increased that fee at all in, I think, 6 or 7 years, and each year the contract goes up 3% each year. So I suggested to the school business manager, why don't we look at that? When's the last time you did it? So I believe the school committee was gonna vote on that. There was some fees for preschool that they were gonna look at. They weren't interested in pursuing the athletic fees because thought it would be overly burdensome on the athletes that play 3 seasons up there. But they're exploring a bunch of different ones. I know they're coming before the finance committee on Thursday night to talk about the shrinking of what we were able to do, the 800 versus the extra 288 put in there, so, to go forward.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions on the budget?
No, I'm good.
So the motion,
So I don't need a motion right now.
it said impossible vote.
I just wanted to cover us in case you guys, if anything came up, but right now I'd hold off because, one, you're gonna be discussing with the chiefs and Rick next week, and I'd wait and see if there's any changes with the school budget.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. Okay, consent agenda.
These items will be voted as one item. These are donations and acceptances of donations. From Kenneth Simpson to the Library Materials Fund, $150. From Judith Hartman to the COA Senior Moments, $25. From Paul and Christine Hendrickson to Senior Moments, $100. From the Council on Aging Pool Players, to the Council on Aging Pool Table Expenditure, $859. From the Walpole Police Union, Local 115, to the Council on Aging Creative Corner, $500. For Local Police Union 115 to Council on Aging, $500. From Frank and Judith Wentworth to the Council on Aging Senior Moments, $100. From Paul and Sadjahur to COA Senior Moments, $100. From Joanne and Ed Damish to COA Senior Moments, and from Dorothea Attila to the COA Senior Moments.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 500. Okay, did we do the minutes?
Yes.
We did that, okay. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna vote to move into executive session.
You want to do my update so we can just
Okay,
get that up?
perfect.
Sorry
We
to
can do that
interrupt
first,
you.
okay, yeah.
So just a few items. The Summer Street 40B hearing is set to open tomorrow night at the Council on Aging, 7 PM. We expect a full house, and we're preparing for overflow rooms upstairs, kind of like what we did with the opening. So we're all going over there tomorrow afternoon to make sure we're all set up. So you're welcome to attend. The charter change, just an update on the charter change. It's been a little while since I provided you with one. It was reported favorably by the municipalities and the regional governing board earlier this month and referred to the Senate Committee on Bills in the third reading last week. Next step is to go for out for the committee and then to be acted on by the full Senate soon, and then it has to go through the House and basically restart the process over again. So it's in process. I knew it would take a long time, but it's working its way through the process. Dupy Street 40B, Ashley made a quick reference to it. We got the application for Dupy Street on Friday. That's for a 12-unit, six-building condominium complex on Dupy Street. It's about a 52,000 square foot lot. We knew this was coming. We walked the site last summer with Mass Housing, but that's been filed, so that's something that the ZBA will have to take up within 40 or so days from Friday. The coronavirus, just wanted to make a note. I know I mentioned it to the board. It's on everyone's radar screen, and I was concerned, what steps are we taking? What do we know from DPH? What do we know from the federal government? So we're gonna basically have a standing meeting every 2 weeks, just with Board of Health, public safety officials, Bridget, and Kerry, and just to keep everybody in the loop. What are we hearing? What's going on? The Board of Health issued a couple of memos last week. We published them on Twitter, Facebook, put them on the website, made sure everybody's available. It's available to everyone. Bridget issued one to all the parents last Thursday, so we're just trying to make sure that people are aware that we're aware that this is a potential problem out there. I'm working with Chief Bailey to come up with some type of response procedure if one were to ever break out here. I threw out the idea of actually putting our third ambulance in service, because if we were to get someone picked up with coronavirus, we would totally need to disinfect that ambulance, take it out of commission for an extended amount of time. So I asked them, couldn't we have 3 ambulances, one as a backup. Couldn't we have that third ambulance be our coronavirus ambulance if it ever gets to it? And
You're not gonna know that.
I hope I don't. You're the nurse. He liked the idea, so it's on our radar, and so.
Well, it's good that we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
And are we connected with the state in any way?
Yes, Melissa's been having calls multiple times a week with them. Melissa, Rika, and Trish Fisher, our public health nurse. So
Great.
Yeah, DPH is doing like daily updates with all cities and towns.
Trish has been working with the school nurses too to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So the timing is good for us to have a nurse in place on our staff, so it helps. So the stretch code, I provided you with a draft outline of the stretch code right now. It's a boilerplate form. I've asked the building commissioner to look it over for us. My goal is before the 24th, when we have Phil Chigurowski in here, is to have some finalized language ready to present to you, because then I want to keep it on file with the town clerk leading up to town meeting, so anybody can come in and view it, post it online and everything. And one other item that's not on my list is liquor license violations. We had 2 liquor license violations last week. We're just waiting on the police reports for those, and we'll start working with the town council and figure out what the procedures are. One's a first-time offender, one's a third-time offender. So obviously the third-time offender, we haven't had too many of those, and Cindy and I have gone through some of the old records to see what we've done in the past, and we'll probably have some recommendations for you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting we had 32 that passed, right?
Yes.
So that's a good sign.
Yeah.
So, the businesses in Walpole are largely doing what they're supposed to do here, and so that's worth noting. Okay, anything else, Jim?
That's it.
Okay. Questions for Jim? Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna move into executive session, and I'll explain that in a minute. When we come back from executive session, we will come back to vote the memorandum of agreement with the Walpole firefighters. But we're gonna have the executive session first, but we'll come back into open session to do that vote.
And to likely vote on a recommendation for Article 13.
Article 13 related to.
Perfect, okay. So pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A3, the purpose of the session will be to conduct strategy with respect to a memorandum of agreement with the fire union, and to further hear updates and conduct strategy with respect to police, dispatcher, and AFSCME contracts from the town administrator, as a discussion in open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the town's position. So that's our purpose for going into executive session. We'll do a roll call vote. David?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jim, yes. Ben?
Yes.
And Mark?
Yes.
Okay, we're now in executive session, so Patrick, just take us down, and we will Ready to go back live?
Yep.
Okay. Patrick, anytime. Okay, we are back out of executive session where we had some strategy discussions on contracts. We have 2 votes to take tonight before we adjourn. One is regarding a memorandum of agreement that we have with the firefighters union, and another one would be Article 13 and the funding related to the new firefighters contract. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to vote favorable action for the agreement for the town of Walpole and the Walpole Permanent Firefighters Association for July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500.
I will make a motion for favorable action of Article 13.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. And so that concludes our business for this evening, and I have a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. 500. We're now adjourned. Thanks very much. Thanks, Patrick. Good night.